What's up guys, welcome to another Technicians Tuesday. Today we are going to be on the road working on an outboard trim unit. We will be replacing the seal on a trim ram cap as well as replacing a leaking pipe that goes on the bottom of this trim unit. First things first, we want to diagnose the problem. Today didn't take much investigation to figure out where this unit was leaking. As we trim the engine up, you can see the fluid spraying out of this little pipe here on the bottom of the unit. While we are here though, we are also going to be changing out one of these trim ram seals as well. These pipes are pretty easy to change, but before we do anything with any trim unit, we want to bring the engine all the way up and set it on the kickstand so it doesn't fall and smash our hands while we are working on it. If the engine is stuck in the down position, we need to undo the manual relief valve that is on the side of the engine. All trim units have this valve, and you can use a large flathead screwdriver to screw it out so that we can manually pick up the engine. If the valve is stripped out and you can't release it, it will need to be drilled out and replaced so that we can lift the engine. Once the pressure is released, we can pull up on the lower unit and get the engine up so we can stick it on the kickstand. To do this, you will either need a buddy or two or a forklift to get the engine up. Depending on what size engine you have, they can get pretty heavy. These pipes commonly rust up like this, and they are fairly simple to change. The next thing we need to do before trying to take the pipe off is to clean up around the threaded fittings to get all the dirt and buildup from around the threads. Contact cleaner works great, and then it's also important to use a 10mm line wrench to break the fitting free and take it off. They can get really stuck on and will round over easily, so the line wrench saves us from a major headache. Then clean up the surface before installing the new pipe, and we want to look at the new pipe before installing it because one side is longer than the other. Make sure that the longer side gets put into the front hole and the short goes in the back. Then just get each fitting started and threaded in by hand until both are all the way in, and then just snug them up with the line wrench. Now for the trim ram caps, there are a couple of tools that can be used. This one here from Motostop is my personal favorite. Then there's this one here. There are a couple of techniques that can be used to get the caps free, like using a pipe to put around the ram and then lowering the engine down onto the tool to hold it in place. Then this one here is the OEM Yamaha tool that is actually my least favorite. This tool fits onto the cap like this, but has the weakest pins out of all the tools that thread into the tool, and I want to show you why I don't like using this one. You can tap the pins into the cap so they fit perfectly, and then when you apply pressure, bam, every single pin breaks off. It does it every time. You run the risk of scratching the ram, and then you have to use a magnet to get the pins out. But with the other tool, we can leave the engine on the kickstand and press the trim button down to run the rams all the way into the cylinders. Then place the tool onto the cap and tap it down to get the pins all the way in. Now we can use a 1/2 inch impact with a 3/8 inch adapter, and with one tap of the trigger, the cap spins right up. If none of this works and the cap is still stuck, you'll have to use an air hammer to get the cap spinning so that you can take it off. Now there is going to be pressure in the trim unit, so make sure and have a pan under the bracket and slowly unscrew the cap until it is almost out, and fluid will begin to pour out of the cylinder and drain down into the pan. Once it stops pouring, screw it the rest of the way off and remove the cap. Take a rag and dry off the ram so we can get a grip on it and wiggle it back and forth until it begins to work its way out of the cylinder, and you can pull it all the way out. It's important to check the rams for scratches, nicks, or pitting that would tear up the seal over time, as well as bring water into the unit when the ram is brought in and then bring fluid out when it comes out. You can just run your fingernail along the ram, and if it catches, you want to use fine 400 grit emery cloth to smooth it out, or just replace the ram if it is extremely bad and you don't want to replace the seals every year. In order to get the rest of the fluid or water out of the cylinder, we'll take a hose like this, and then using a ketchup bottle, we'll stick the hose all the way down into the cylinder and then have the other end below the trim unit. Use the bottle to create a vacuum on the hose and then pull it off quickly when the fluid starts to come out. Now just let it drain all the way out and we'll move on to replacing the seal in the cap. Using a pick, just work the retaining ring off of the cap and then we'll take a flat head to pry up on the seal until it pops out. If you have a vise, stick the cap in a vise and use a seal puller or screwdriver to pry the old seal out. Clean the cap out with a rag and some contact cleaner and then use the pick to get all of the rust buildup out of where the retainer sits. Using some ATF or gasket sealing compound, press the seal in using a suitable socket, or if you are not near your tools, whatever is round and comparable to press the new seal into the cap. Insert the retaining ring and we can put the cap back in. This is pretty simple, just lube up the seal with some ATF and stick it back on the ram. Now fill the cylinder with fluid before putting the cap and ram back in, but once you have hydraulic fluid up to the bottom of the threads, just insert the ram and get the cap started by hand so we don't strip out any of the threads. Now just tighten the cap down with the tool until you can't tighten it anymore. We'll go ahead and take out the reservoir plug and fill the reservoir with fluid until we get the fluid to the top. Then hit the trim up button to suck the fluid in until the rams come out and the unit is completely full. Sometimes the unit will get airlocked and won't suck the fluid in when you try and trim the engine. What we want to do to fix this is just undo the manual relief valve on the side of the unit and then pick up on the bottom of the engine a couple of times and tighten the valve back up. This usually forces the air up into the reservoir and we can trim the unit until it is completely full of fluid. Install the plug and run the engine up and down a few times, then top the fluid off one more time and we're done. This is the most basic and easiest way to fix a power tilt and trim unit on an outboard, and if you have learned something today, why not hit that thumbs up button? Then check out some of our other videos where we have a growing library of resources that consist of easy to follow videos as well as articles that cover anything that has to do with a boat or an outboard. We hope you'll get subscribed to the channel and check us out on our website at bornagainboating.com. Let us know about your experience with power trim units in the comments section below. Thank you for watching and we hope to see you back here on the next week's Technicians Tuesday.